In this video, I'm going to continue with the overview of solving equations. So what I'm doing is just basically reviewing the different types of equations that you may encounter in college algebra. Remind you again that I'll have a link in the description to my other channel where I have more tutorials in math and so forth. So you can look at that if you, again, don't find what you need on this channel. But I do appreciate any feedback that you could give me. Okay, let me just look over what I did last time. In the last video, part 1, we looked at solving linear equations. So we went through these two equations. Those are the answers we got. And I just remind you that for linear equations, those are first degree equations. So you expect to have either one solution, or if the variables actually cancel out, you could have an infinite solution depending on what you get after that. You get 0 equal to 0, for example, or 1 equal to 1. You have an infinite solution. Or if you get a contradiction like 0 equal to 2 or 0 equal to 5, when you try to eliminate the variables to solve for x or y, whatever the variable is, you'll have no solution. So you can have either one solution, infinite solution set, or no solution. We also went over quadratic equations. Those are second degree equations, so you can expect to have at most two solutions. So you could have two distinct solutions, one solution that may be repeated. You could have complex solutions. Okay, so you can have real and non-real solutions. And the real solutions could be rational or irrational. The irrational ones are the ones that would have, say, a radical in the solution. Now, sometimes they'll ask you to find the real solutions. Okay, so these are the ones that we did on the quadratic equations here. First one we got 6 and negative 5. That's an example of a real rational solution. Number 4, this one has a radical. So this would be a real solution, but it's irrational. And then on the 5th one that I did, we had the I, okay, imaginary or complex solution. So if they had told you to find the real solution set for this particular equation, then you would say no real solution. But when they tell you solve the equation, then they want any solution, whether it's real or non-real. Okay, so we're going to pick it up in part 2 with rational equations. So rational equations are the equations that basically have fractions with, say, a variable in the denominator. Now you saw in the last video that typically when you have an equation that has fractions, the first thing you want to do is clear the fractions. Makes it easier to solve if you eliminate the fractions by multiplying through by the LCD. Okay, so this one here again has one side 0. And you can see the denominator here is x and x squared. So the lowest common denominator is going to be x squared. So if I multiply through by x squared, the denominators are going to divide this x squared. Okay, so I'll wind up with something that has no fraction. So just multiply through both sides. So every term of both sides of the equation is multiplied. So x squared times 9 will give me 9x squared. Okay, x squared times 3 over x right here. So you notice the x will divide into the x squared x times, and then multiply by 3. This will give me 3x. And then the third term here, minus 2 over x squared. If you multiply by x squared, the x squareds cancel out. That leaves me a minus 2. And on the right side I have 0, so if I multiply 0 times anything, I'm going to get 0. So x squared times 0 is going to be 0. So I get 9x squared plus 3x minus 2. So as we saw on the first video, when you have a quadratic, the two basic methods are factoring and the quadratic formula. So the first thing you try to do is you try to factor this out. So I got 9x squared can be factored into 3x and 3x. That's one combination. So we try that out. And because the third term, this is a trinomial here, because the third term is negative, the signs here in the parentheses have to be opposite. So one has to be plus, one has to be minus. So plus and a minus or minus and a plus. So I do it this way. And then the factors of 2 are basically 1 and 2. So you try to arrange these so that you wind up with this answer right here when you multiply it out. Okay, so let's see. Well, if I put the 2 here and the 1 here, and then check it out. 3x times 3x is 9x squared minus 1 times 2. I get the minus 2 there. And then here, inner terms here, 2 times 3x is 6x minus 1 times 3 is a minus 3x. 6x and minus 3x is 3x. So that checks out. Okay. If it hadn't factored out, then just like in the last video, you would use a quadratic formula. Okay, so we'll have the product of two factors equal to 0. Well, that's going to happen when either one or both factors are equal to 0. So what you do is just set each factor equal to 0. So 3x plus 2 can be 0, or 3x minus 1 can be 0. So by doing this, we wind up with two linear equations. So solve each of these for x. So for the first one, I add negative 2 to both sides. Negative 2 will cancel over here, so 0 negative 2 is negative 2. Okay, I want to solve for x, so I divide both sides by 3, and I get minus 2/3. So one solution can be negative 2/3. The other one, 3x minus 1 equals 0. Add 1 to both sides, and I get 3x is equal to 1. Divide by 3, both sides by 3. The 3's on the left side will cancel, giving me a 1x or x, and on the right side I get 1/3. Okay, so the solution to this equation, this quadratic equation, remember quadratic can have at most two solutions. It could have two solutions, one solution, or no real solution, but you could have imaginary solutions. This one has two real solutions, and they are rational. So x is negative 2/3, or x can be 1/3. Okay. So again, remind you that if I tend to go fast on some of these videos, just kind of pause it and rewind and check it out again. We'll clear this. Okay. We get to the next one here. Again, a rational equation. Now, I do want to point out to you, that whenever you're working with rational equations and you multiply through by the LCD to eliminate the fraction, the one problem that does is it does introduce extraneous roots. Okay, that is, those are answers or solutions that will work for the transformed equation. That is the one you got after you multiplied through by the LCD. But they may not work for the original equation. So remember, you're always trying to check the original equation. Okay. Now, the one thing you mainly have to check out is that the value you get does not produce a 0 in the denominator. Okay, so let me go back to the first one. the denominator here has an x and an x squared, so we got 1/3 and negative 2/3 for the answer. So there's no way that plugging in a 1/3 or negative 2/3 is going to generate a 0. So that's okay. That's going to work. Okay. So you don't have to bother checking it. That's the only check you have to make. Make sure you don't get a 0 in the denominator. Because sometimes checking these equations might be even more involved or take longer than actually working it out. Okay. So in the next one, I got the denominator. First one has denominator x minus 2, x plus 1, and the next one's x squared minus x minus 2. This is a quadratic trinomial here. So always factor these out. Okay, so x squared minus x minus 2 can be factored into x minus 2 and x plus 1. Okay. Now, before I actually proceed with this, I want you to realize this. If I put a 2 right here where the x is in the first one, I get 0 in the denominator. Or if I put a negative 1 here in this one, I get 0 in the denominator. So if x is equal to 2 or x is equal to negative 1, those are extraneous solutions, so those are not going to work. Okay, so just keep that in mind. You got to rule those out. Okay, so with that in mind, then let's go ahead and multiply through by the LCD, which is x minus 2. And x plus 1. Okay, so for the first one, x over x minus 2, we're multiplying by x minus 2, x plus 1. So notice the x minus 2 and the x minus 2 are going to divide out. So that's going to leave you with an x plus 1. And that x plus 1 is going to be multiplied by the numerator, which is x. Okay, so that's going to give me x times x is x squared. And x times 1 is x. Okay. Now, for the second term, the 2 over x plus 1, if I multiply through by the LCD, x plus 1 cancels out. So that leaves me with x minus 2 here, and then that's going to be multiplied by 2. So 2 times x is 2x. And 2 times a minus 2 is a minus 4. Okay. Now on the right side, got 7x plus 1 over this x minus 2, x plus 1. But see, that's going to cancel with the LCD. Those cancel out. All I'm left is with 7x plus 1. Okay. Now we combine terms. So on the left side, I got x squared, and then x and 2x. That's 1x, and 2x is 3x. Minus 4 is equal to 7x. Plus 1. Okay, so it looks like this was going to be a quadratic. Got the x squared there. So again, what we want to do is we want to simplify, combine terms, and we want one side to be 0. Okay, so what I'll do is that I'll add a negative 7x here to get rid of this one on this side, but then I have to add it over here. And then I get rid of this minus 4 by adding a 4 here. Then I have to add it over here. Okay, so we got left here then. Okay, so on the left side, I'll have an x squared. And then 3x and minus 7x is a minus 4x. Minus 4 and 4 cancel. 7x minus 7x cancels. 1 and 4 is 5. Okay, so I got x squared minus 4x is equal to 5, and it's a quadratic, so again, I want one side to be 0. Doesn't matter which side, but generally we make the right side 0. So let's add a negative 5 to both sides here, and this will produce x squared minus 4x minus 5 equal to 0. Okay, that's a quadratic. And again, we always try to factor first, and if the factoring doesn't work, then we go to the quadratic formula, as we saw on the first video. So x squared factored into x and x. Since the third term is negative, again, the signs have to be different, so there should be a plus here and a minus over here, or a minus and a plus, doesn't matter. And then I want the factors of 5. The only factors of 5 are 1 and 5, so I want to arrange these over here so that when I multiply it out, I get this negative 4. So the best way to do that is to put the 5 here and the 1 here. And then, of course, we set each factor equal to 0. So x plus 1 can be 0. The product of two numbers or two factors is 0 if one or both factors are 0. So we just set each factor equal to 0 and solve for x. So we come up with two linear equations. Okay, here I want to isolate the x, so I add a negative 1 to both sides. These cancel out, and I get x is equal to 1, or negative 1. So that's negative 1. And on the second equation, adding 5 to both sides, I get x is equal to 5. Okay, so again, on these types of equations, the rational equations, when you get the values, possible solutions for x, just go back to the original equation. Now it's going to check on this one right here. If you plug it into this one right here, it'll check there. But we want to make sure it works for the original equation. So like I said, if you put a negative 1 right here in the second term, negative 1 plus 1 will give me 0. So 2 over 0 is undefined. So this one, you got to reject. And then over here, I come back and, okay, if I put a 5 over the x is here, 5 minus 2 is 3, 5 and 1 is 6. And obviously this one factors into this, so that this one's okay. So for this one, x equal to 5 is the solution. Okay. Now, if you want to go through and check, make sure that you plug in the x, 5 for x in both sides of the equation, and you get both numbers the same on each side. It'll work, but it'll take you a little bit longer than this right here. So just make sure that your steps are correct here, and then just go back and see, okay, x doesn't make any denominator equal to 0, so assuming we did the steps correctly here, x equal 5 should be a solution. Okay, cancel this one. And notice the instructions on this one here said find the real solutions, if any, of each of the following rational equations. Okay, well, we have real solutions. We're given the real solutions. There's no imaginary solution so far. Okay, number eight. Number 8 is very similar to number 7. So you got x plus 2, x minus 1. So this one would factor into x plus 2 and x minus 1. Okay, so again, notice that the numbers that make the denominator 0 here would be a -2 right here, or a 1, and the same thing on this denominator. So that means that if you get x equal to -2 as a possible answer, or x equal to 1, then you have to reject that. And if you get nothing else other than those, then you would simply say no solution. So here, then you would multiply by x plus 2. And x minus 1. Okay. So notice again, in this one here, if I multiply the first term by x plus 2, x minus 1, the x plus 2 will cancel out, so that'll leave me with x minus 1. So 3x times x minus 1 will give me 3x squared minus 3x plus. For the next term, I got an x minus 1 down there, so the x minus 1 cancels this x minus 1 over here. I'm left with 1 times x plus 2. So this is x plus 2. Equals. And then on the right side, this factors into x plus 2, x minus 2, so those divide out. All I'm left is 4 minus 7x. Okay. Now we simplify each side. So the only thing I can do to the left side is add the minus 3x and the x. That'll be a minus 2x. Is equal to 4 minus 7x. Okay, so again, I'm going to try to get everything on one side because it's a quadratic again. So I'm going to want one side 0. So I'm going to add a 7x here to cancel this on the right side, which means I have to add it over here with this one. And then a 4, I can cancel that by adding a minus 4. Do the same thing on the left side. So what do we have left? We have 3 x squared minus 2x, and a 7x is a 5x. Two and minus 4 is a minus 2 equals, and everything else on the right side, the 4 minus 4 minus 7x is canceled to 0. So I wind up with 3x squared plus 5x minus 2 is equal to 0. So then we proceed to try to factor this out. Okay, so again, the third term is minus, so the signs here have to be different. Plus and a minus, or minus and a plus. So let's see. First, 3x squared factors into 3x and 1x. So this will be 3x. Okay. Factors of 2 will be 2 and 1. Okay, but I want to come up with a plus positive 5x. So the best thing to do here is to put a plus here and then put the 2 here. And then a minus over here, minus 1 equal to 0. And always double check these. X times 3x is 3x squared. 2 times a minus 1 is minus 2. And then the middle term here, minus x, and 2 times 3 is 6x. 6x and minus x will give me the 5x. So 3x minus 1 can be 0. Right? The product of two factors is 0, so either one or both factors are 0. So set these equal to 0. So here we add 1 to both sides. Get 3x is equal to 1. Divide by 3. So x can be 1/3. On the second equation, add a negative 2 to both sides, we get x is equal to negative 2. Those are the perspective solutions, okay? But again, if you go back and try to plug in -2 in this denominator right here or over here in this one, it produces a 0. Division by 0 is not defined, so I got to reject this one. So this one's out. X equal to 1/3 doesn't produce 0 in any of the denominators. So x equal to 1/3 will work. Now, if you want to go through and check it, it'll take you longer than probably doing this right here. But again, the main thing to on these types of problems is to make sure you're careful with your steps, your signs, and so forth, your factoring. And if the value you get does not make the denominator 0 in any of the fractions, then that will be a solution. Okay. Okay, so this is rational equations, ways to solve them. So again, I have more detailed videos on some of these, so you can check those out on this channel, or again check out my other channel, my Dr. T Math and more. Again, I'll put a link on that for that on the in the description, so you can check that out. In the next coming videos that I have, I will be looking at equations, say higher order than 2. So you could have a 3rd degree equation, a 4th degree equation, or a 5th degree equation, and we'll be looking at the techniques for solving those. Also coming up are exponential equations, logarithmic equations, systems of linear equations, and systems of nonlinear equations. Okay, so keep working on your math, and hopefully these are helping you. And we'll see you in the next video.